a little bit, very brief background. How many of you here know Jean personally? How many of you don't know Jean personally? Okay, so that's good. Those of you. So in terms of an introduction, after a semester in College of Weaving, about 4 or 5 years, several years passed, and then Jean began apprenticing with Greta Bodegard for 2.5 years. And she was working with Greta on Greta's commissions and learning to weave in Greta's style for an intense, long period of time. And then after that, Jean began to take weaving workshops with Archie Brennan and other people. I think other people around the country. And at that point in time, probably her kids were young and at home. And this taught her different styles and different approaches to the medium that were outside what she learned from Greta, which may have been more typically a Norwegian style. And then she also started buying looms along the way, and I'm guessing she can fill us in that they were various sizes, but I think smaller. And then there were also many trips and traveling adventures to different parts of the country in Europe. And during the travels, she would frequently take a small loom to work on, so she was never really very far from her medium. So the first question that I'd like to start out with is, I thought it was really cool that Jean said that her original inspiration came from her mother, who is not a weaver, but so, and you can keep the mic because I'll just give it.
Well, my mom, was one of the smartest people I knew for, especially with a 9th grade education. She was an amazing seamstress. I don't know if you remember back when I was a kid, when you were a kid, if you wore something homemade and somebody said, "Is that homemade?" That was not a compliment, And so if I wore my clothes, they'd say, "Oh, where'd you get that?" So, yeah, that's it, It was unlike today where people are looking for, handmade. But anyway, so I don't know, she just got things, took nothing, made it into something, pretty inventive and worked out what needed to be done. Got it done. And anyway,
And then the next question and I would sort of follow sequentially with these for a little bit, and that is, for that 2.5 years of working with Greta, which was really intense, and I know you said that it was like the most valuable thing that you could do at that point in time, apprenticing yourself to somebody for that long period of time. What was the greatest benefit that came out of that and that sort of kept you going?
repetition. I will butterflies for at least 3 weeks. Just made it over and over. And it was a piece that was yellow. And so they were not different. They were all the same. And, but I did learn, you're sitting next to her and she looks over and says, "Take it out." Okay, take it all out, So it's having that guidance and having that, like I said, repetition. One of the best things is just over and over, and I kept going back, so obviously I liked it. So, I don't know, that was super important. I feel like it was a gift that was just landed on my lap, because I was kind of in a tough spot. I didn't know what I was going to do, and Pat comes home and says, "Hey, I hear there's this Norwegian tapestry weaver who needs an apprentice," and I thought, what? In Rapid City? So, I'm serious.
And if anybody has any questions, I would say, just raise your hand at the time so that it's informal enough so that I'm sure that will work. So what is it specifically that's maintained your interest in such a time-consuming and tedious process?
Fiber. I've always said I could just decorate a whole room with wads of skeins because they're so beautiful. and I love the texture, and I had to get over the slow process, all the setting up. It's very tedious to get a loom set up and properly, you know. And if you don't get it right, it's just gonna cause you a heck all the way through the piece. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just sort of I take on a project and I can't stop until it's done. You know, a little obsessive, but I think, you know, Greta said to me one day, I said, I just want a weave, and she said, oh, you Americans, you want everything right now. Does that sound like Greta?
And that leads me to my next question about which artists throughout, you know, in your lifetime, either weaving or in other mediums, have you found the most inspiration from?
I was thinking about this question because my very first, I got out of high school and my very first recognition of a famous artist that I could think of or that I got excited about was Finninger, who is a prodigy of Picasso. But his was more, not as wild and bright colored. I love that style for such a long time because I thought it was very, I don't know. Later I was thinking, oh, this is very weavable, you know, because of all the structure of it. So, and then of course, you know, drooled over Van Gogh. And then I got into the 1960s weavers who kind of created the movement of tapestry weaving, came back into, because it really fell out of the limelight for a long time. And so in the 60s, it kind of got kicked back up, at least in the United States. I'm sure it came back earlier in Europe and stuff.
And for this particular show and these last few years of working on it, and I think a lot of this actually happened during COVID, as I recall, so you must have been able to, Pat couldn't go on trips, so you could drag me away. So what was your routine like that kept you so prolific and so constant? Would you get up,
eat, sleep, weave. Eat, sleep, weave. Next day, same thing, over and over. I just, you know, it was just, I liked it. I didn't have to do anything else. I had awesome help. Finally, at the very beginning of me telling him I got this show and everything, he says, what if I just cook while you're doing all this stuff? And I went, yeah, he goes, because if I have to wait on you, I'll starve to death. So he took care of himself as well. So I could just focus on the designs, or I paint, or I did something every single day, every day. And it was usually at least minimum 6 hours a day, up to 12.
So changing so quickly that lifestyle of, you know, traveling a fair amount and doing lots of different things, it wasn't difficult for you to just sort of immerse yourself in the studio and being in that same place?
No, it wasn't difficult at all. I've been begging to do that for years. I mean, but he was dragging me out on vacations, which, you know, I was really happy to because they were really cool places, but I just wanted to work. And I guess I just had this drive. It was just a drive. I had to do it. I had to stay with it all the time, and I had to just push myself. And, you know, I read books about it. I read books on other people on design. I wrote my journal. I don't know. You just keep going. Hi, Tim.
I don't know if everybody here has seen the video of your process, but could you tell a little bit of how you made that and how you could make it available to other people if they wanted to watch it? Because it's just incredible. I mean, I'm not an artist, I'm not a musician, but I appreciate art and I appreciate music, and that video.
Now you appreciate tapestry weaving? Perfect.
That's art.
So what was the first part of that question?
Tell us about
how we made that movie. Well, right at the beginning, Pat offered to take, to make film of this. And so, first of all, he said, okay, set me down, and he goes, what are the steps? What is every single step you go through? So then he would come down. So it was a year and a half of him, what are you doing now? Should I set it up? So he'd set up the thing, or, whatever. So that's how he made a year and a half into 6 minutes, which I think is amazing. But it was really fun I hadn't really thought about it, all the steps. I don't know about, when you paint or whatever, do you think about every single little step of it you do, you just do it. So it was nice to see it broken out, because some of those steps are horrendously long-term.
And where can somebody find it?
Oh, it's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, you can just
And
look up.
on your website. Yeah.
And it's on my website, which is just Selvy-Wyss.com. I just got that. It's kind of in its baby faces, but my daughter made me a website, which was lovely.
So if we go on to the process and a few process questions, and it sort of comes right off of the working the process in the video. How important is sketching and painting and photographing to your process? And are there times when you just go for it without all of those preliminary stages, or is it really methodical?
Well, this is all work that's pretty much thought out, but maybe not in detail on something like the police piece. I just sort of had, a scribble up here for the clouds and a line, and then I had that dark spot. But the rest of it was pretty much just me figuring it out as I went. But the rest, I had cartoons. And I think photographing and I think sketching out in plein air, or taking photographs and coming back to the studio. It gives you a connection to the piece before you're actually doing the piece. And I think it's important to have that connection, because then you have a flow. It's not like it's just choppy, or, you get the same rhythm. And that's important, especially since these take so long. I have to come back into it day after day. And sometimes I could even notice. It's like, whoa, I was really uptight then. Because the weaving would get really tight. Or, and it all depends on the thickness of the warp, on the weft to the warp. And there's a proportional thing that you can really drill down on mathematically, but I kind of hit the mathematical part, but I kind of just go with what I see and my gut and on colors. Actually, when I paint in the past, I thought, just colors are awful. They are not anything I'm going to use. But I used the cartoon anyway. It was just more of I used it as a way of guidance, and then I would change the color as I went. And I tried on just about every one of them to do a little technique that I hadn't done before. Maybe not so much on the smaller ones, but these bigger ones, it was really fun to push a little bit. Like some of the supplemental warps, like over here on that glimpse, over there, they're just those in the foreground. They're sort of minor, down at the very bottom, yes. Yeah. Those was a supplemental warp, which I just tied another warp to all the other ones, and hung it off of the loom at a different angle, and then I just wove on that. So actually it's all woven under there, but that's another set on top of it. And to do water, you've got to figure out how to create the reflection, and it's a lot of blending of colors in that. I bet I did that water 3-4 times. Maybe not the whole thing, but I take it out. Nope, can't do that. That was one of my more difficult ones to do. But.
Same with that one? Was that difficult?
Oh, no, not so much. It was, I didn't do any specific other things. This is just making sure that you've got the blended and then the solid color, so it doesn't just look like there's stripes, but to blend it from one to the other. And also I went, oh my God, it's Japanese. But now that I take it out, not at all. At first, that's what I was thinking. But so I'm gonna ask a question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
How do you transition the color, and
Mhm.
how do you come up with color? Just elaborate a little bit more on your process of choosing color, and then there's something about how you transition and change color.
Okay, so I have a bunch of yarn over here, and I thought initially I would try to start and do a little demonstration, but like I said, it's like drawing. It's very slow. So this is a little painting I did a while back. I thought it would work really well, as a base to go with. It's not necessarily a great painting, but it is something that I can go off of. So this, most likely, I won't. I guess I do have a little cartoon on it over there on that loom. But I'll just follow that. And the transition of color, so you use 3 or 4 yarns at a time, 3 depending on the size of the piece. But this is like 8 ends per inch, which means it's 8 forked ends for every inch. So you get this kind of a surface. The tunnel, all made with 4 ends per inch. It's a little bumpier. It's it's got a heavier texture because it's got half the warp ends are used in that. But this you can, so the smaller the warp ends you get, the more detail you can get, right? And so, but with the color, depending on what you're doing, so if you want one color to gradiate, you take 4 or 5 of the same color. If you want to transition, you take 1 out, put a lighter one in. Do that for a while, then you take that 2 out or 1 out, and then you just keep adding it in, taking out one of the original ones and adding in another one, and then eventually you get it to gradiate up, that's how you want it to be. So this one isn't as much as the gradation, and also some of the hair that looks so cool is I went through a dyeing process, like months of getting every piece of white yarn I had in my blaze and just dyeing it because it was so much fun. People usually dye for a color that they have an idea of what they're going to do with it. Not me. I don't think that far ahead. I just have fun of the process. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but that's how I understood work. So the blending is one of my favorite things, and to make all the bobbins of all the different colors and blending them up. It's just, and I think I get all my colors, this is what I'm going to use. No, I never get it right. I have to go back to my source and start, not all over, but it's like I didn't get enough variation. And also then you want to sometimes just throw in the opposite of color. So, blue, if you throw in some orange, just it pops. It pops the blue. You don't necessarily see the orange, but it pops. So, sometimes I'll do that. And then in series, my loom is a big loom. It's a 5 foot wide Lamacra. It's called Regina. It's a big tapestry or rug loom. So I work horizontal. That's what they call high work. And people who weave tapestry on a regular loom or a flat loom is called a low work. It's because the spread of the shed is lower on this than you can get here. So, and a lot of them, when they started, when weaving was being done by the men only, they wove from the back. So they had all the strings. It wasn't until like the 60s when everybody was coming back into weaving that they started flipping it around so you could actually see what you're weaving. So they would have it with all the strings on the back, and then they'd stick a mirror back there so they could see what they look. it seemed, I mean, it's already very labor intensive. Let's not add one more crazy thought. I don't know. But they were working on those big ones that they, stuck in castles that were huge, so I don't know.
Did men do those?
Men, women. Women more for the handwork. Yeah, so it was like, it wasn't until into the 20th century that they started taking over. There was, I suppose there was a few smatterings of women who did it, but you don't hear about them at all. Anyway, where else were we going with that? Oh, my series. So my big warp that I put on, I go 6 yards of warp, and then say 30 inches wide. And that 6 yards is a lot. It's a lot of warp to handle. But any more than that, it's crazy at 6 yards, because you have to, when you put your warp on the loom, you have to have every one of those warp ends has to be tight. If part of it is loose, then what happens to your piece? You have a loose piece, and so you've got to have them all consistently tight. So that is kind of a challenge. But I do 6 yards because I can usually get 3 decent sized pieces out of it. Therefore, there's a series. So this was the first one. The big wave was the second one. And the least piece was the third one on that run. And then, let's see, this one, Foreign Lands over here, was the first one. Autumn was the second one, and Getting Lost was the third one. And then these 3, then that, the glimpse of Fairy Tale, and Sunflowers, and Kayak Cove. Those were all like my thought process at that time. So you can see this was sort of made up. These were all fantasy places that I was traveling. And those are like places I've actually taken photographs at, French flowers. This is at Bismarck Lake. Nobody can see unless you're in a kayak. And I don't know, I was on some trip. And I actually was bicycling and I thought, oh my God, it's a fairy tale. What is that? So I had to stop. And it was just a little break in the trees, and that is what I saw. So, we traveled to France, and so I had to try to emulate the land there because it was gold. I mean, the dirt there. It's where like Van Gogh would go and get ochre to make his paints, and I just walked up and I went, oh my God, the ground glows here. I mean, it's just like the sun hit it, and it was stunning all the way around.
Could I ask you a question in that space?
Yeah.
So if I understood this right, you have one loom, and you've got 3 different artistic things going on. Is that right?
Okay, I was asking about the microphone.
Okay, sorry about
it.
So, go ahead.
He's asking a question about the series, when you were talking about having 3 different pieces on the loom and cutting them off. And
So I leave them on. I just roll them up,
sequential.
so I don't cut them off each time.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you finish one and then,
I just crank it up.
Yep, okay,
Sticks in
thanks.
there, pack it down, and go on.
yeah,
Because if I had to set up my loom every single time, it takes 8
Yeah,
hours to do a 6 yard warp. I mean, I have help, but the little tedious stuff I have to, And I don't even have a harness, which if you know anything about weaving and the sheds, and you've got all these little things, I don't do that at all. I hand pick. So I don't have to do that one extra step.
So-
Because it's tedious and it's just over under. It's not like I'm making a pattern. I'm just going over one, under one, over one, over one. So I just pick it.
so you stick with one, get it done, and then roll it up, or, yep, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, because anyway. And the other reason I really like doing this is I've always felt like it's kind of sculptural. I'm starting from the ground up. And I really like the thought that I'm making the fabric. I'm not buying the fabric, I'm making it.
Yeah,
Even though it's a rug. Basically, That's a draw for me, is that I'm actually creating something from scratch, the materials are just, wild. I mean, fiber is just all over the place, but bringing it together, and I don't know, I like that part. And the other thing is, you've got to do, it's pixels. It's just like a computer screen, So, it's, if everything is on a pixel and you just do it, follow that, then, you should have pretty much your design. But you gotta have that design down. Because I have woven things that I thought were really crappy because I didn't have my design good. It wasn't a strong design, it was just, So, it made me realize the importance of, again, the preparatory work of getting ready. So I would say I have 20 hours into it before I even started weaving, or more. So I did actually look up my hours today.
Yeah, so give an example of, just choose a piece that had X amount of hours on it, or compare two pieces.
240. Now that's just weaving time. One of the first things that Greta told me, write your hours down. Well, I can only write the hours down that I'm next to my loom, and I have paper to do that. But when I'm doing all the handwork, I might be in the car, or I might be on a trip, or I might be sitting in the living room, so I don't write those down. And I know it's at least 30 to 35% more time once I take it off the loom. Because it's all got those loose things the ends are all loose, and so I have to make a braid on each end, and then I have to pull it under, and get ready to hang it, and all that. So, that was like 270, 270, 240, 500. But, these over here were like 100 to 150. That medium size there, depending on the design and how often I have to take things out and start over. So.
Hey, Jean, going back to making your design, your trees look very not designed.
You got it. So, if you've ever been to my house, you've seen my basement, and it's a mole hole. It's wonderful, but it's a mole hole. I don't know what's going on outside. I looked at the clock one day and I went, 2 o'clock. AM or PM? I had no idea. I worked till 2. I was, so when the weather gets nice, I have a really hard time being inside. And I've been fantasizing, then I wouldn't work in the summer, right? I just didn't get anything done. So I fantasized this outdoor studio, and I walked around the house forever, at least a couple of years, thinking about a place, and all of a sudden I remembered our garden shed. And I went, oh my God, that's it! So I went out to the back and figured it out, and Pat and I built this giant 8-foot wide by 5-foot tall on a loom, just out of a steel rod and ropes attached to the ceiling and attached to the bottom. And then I just string rope anyway, this started because I needed to be outside. Well, then I thought, what am I going to live on this? Well, I have millions of things in my studio. So I started with this tornado, thinking I'm going to get rid of some stuff. So it's all anything, it's garden hoses, it's conduit, it's a lot of tool that I got from Salvation Army, where people, had their wedding and they have yards and yards and yards of tool. And anyway, so some of that vinyl, Salvation Army finds are pretty weird. That top part is like a vinyl, leopard skin, that somebody cut out for placemats. So there were 12 of them. And I'm like, these are cool, but man, who would want placemats? Anyway, I just slid them up and twisted them all together. So I do that a lot. So, I've even got a pair of pliers. It was a brand new roll of plastic twine. that contractors would use, brand new. Warp! Ran out in the middle of the street, you know? So it was my warp. And so, you know, I told you this is 8 ends per inch. This is 5 ends per foot. So it's really big. Maybe this one isn't quite that. That might be, looks like to me it's smaller. But these, that's what it was. So I continued putting these perimeters on myself that I had to have it, own it, someone would gave it to me, or I got it at Restore, and you can't go to Restore unless you desperately need it. I mean, I really wanted to get rid of some stuff. So all of this is ribbons. I go into stores, they have a 90% off or 75% off all their ribbons and stuff, and I buy it all. And then I thought, what am I gonna do with this? So this is what I did with it finally. So this has got, you know, inner tubes, or this isn't an inner tube, it's just a funky rubber fabric that I found somewhere. These are wrapped branches that I actually took a piece of wire, stiff wire through every branch, and wrapped it with other wire, and then I started to write, then I started decorating once, because I didn't want it to, I wanted the strength of that. And I don't know what this is. I have no idea. Plastic spring. What would you use a plastic spring for? Well, there's a good aspen. And so a lot of this is I cut the fabric, just like Deb does with your rugs. You know, you stripped it. I was almost called you. Can I borrow your stripper? You know, that cutter thing. Because I just did it by hand, or ribbed it. And these I made, and I had no idea what I was going to do with them. And I went to Restore, and they had these substrates there that I could work off of. So that was great. But that was how these grew. I wanted to do a sculpture. I wanted to get rid of my stuff. I found all this stuff. I have a great big loom. So it all kind of, you know, came together. I guess I really had wanted to make a sculpture. From day one, you know, I kept thinking, this is like a sculpture. Building these stuff, you know, it's like a sculpture. So I think that's actually where it came from.
But did you always just use that big loom? You built the outside, you and Pat made the outside one. So where were these woven on?
On the outside one.
Outside one.
They were on the outside one.
And then do you ever sort of, you have other looms, right? Do you ever sort of stop working on the big one and say,
You know, the
I have
big one
an
is
idea?
just so beautiful, and it's so heavy, and it doesn't move, and it's great. But sometimes you do need another one traveling, and I forgot to bring copper looms that are just copper with the corners. Anyway, that makes a really great loom that's not very expensive. I did buy this Enrich loom, which is over here, which is much more substantial. You can put, you know, heddles on it. I don't know. I thought I'd just try some. Everybody was doing these Enrich looms, and they are really nice. But nothing beats my Vermocker. I don't know. I got it a long time ago, and I'm pretty partial to it. But when I travel, I have to bring it.
So the little ones.
We're done on them. I have a loom that's this big. I've got another one that's maybe this big. And sometimes I'll just warp it up for a narrow one. So I have several ones that I play with. Mostly all out of copper. You can do it out of PVC pipe. They're made for that too. Any other questions out here? Yes.
What do you use for warp on your more conventional style?
Signed twine. Signed twine, really. S-E-I-N-E twine.
Is it linen?
No, it's cotton.
It's cotton.
Comes
When I
in
use
a
cotton,
bunch of sizes.
When I use cotton, it stretches on me.
This doesn't.
Okay.
This doesn't stretch. I've never had that. I mean, it seems like it's, because if it ever gets bulky, it's because I haven't tightened it myself. Because I tighten it strong enough that if there is any give, it's gonna be there. So this one was based off of this. unraveling. You know, I was writing in my hours. I was like, oh, I got these hours, and I went, oh God, this took me 3 days. I mean, I was in a workshop learning how to do this process. This, you know, the pull, it's called the pull board. You weave, partly leave them, or leave the warps open. Don't weave everything, so that when you pull it, they'll loop on itself. So I went from that to that, which probably wasn't a smart move. I probably needed in between. Because this was, like, the bottom is 5 feet and the top was 10 feet when I took it off the loop. So it stretched way up. And then that took 3 days and friends to come over and pull. And you just had to pull it one at a time, and hope, you know. And that's why you need that sign point, so you had the strength of it. Because I pull really hard, it would never break. Anyway, that was a really big challenge to get that one down. Because it was, you know, the work would show, and I did it, you know, I'd pull it all the way up, and I think, oh, I'm done. Nope, got to do it again. I bet I went back 3 times. I was doing the whole thing, pulling the whole thing again and again. And anyway.
So which part are you pulling, Jean?
The top.
The
top part.
And bringing it down. And so
Yeah,
you,
right.
So somehow you did something to do that tapestry.
Okay, if I'm weaving all these, if I weave everything, it just stays flat. But if I miss some, like this much at a time, chunks everywhere, you know, miss the warp, I don't have anything on it, and then I come along and push it, it's gonna disappear, that light will disappear. It'll loop whatever is next to it.
So how did you make it 3D?
That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
You pull it and it loops.
Oh, right.
It loops when I pull it. It doesn't loop on the loom. It loops as I'm manipulating the,
Thanks.
yeah. That was really good for me to do. Big step. Big step. To move beyond the flat.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how did you get that idea?
I went to a workshop from a lady, Fiona, from Scotland, who really knew this stuff, and so I worked on this, and anyway, that was where I came up with the idea. In the class, I was like, God, this is just a great tree top. But you know, this is the bottom, right? So it's easier. That was the top. So I didn't think that out. So sometimes you just do it. You just got to take a leap of faith, not knowing what's going to be on the other side. You know, and I'm like, okay, I could really screw this up, but I bet I can figure out something to make out of it if I did. But I just wanted to see if I could do that. So
Outside of normal.
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
I mean,
I mean, the woman I learned it from does small pieces. She does these fabulous waves, but you know, she makes relatively, you know, not very huge pieces, not a lot of huge pieces. I don't know how much she's ever done. So I just wanted to take it to a bigger scale, a bigger, and I've not seen anything quite along those lines, but you know, it doesn't mean there's not been out there. But I mean, like I was telling you in the 60s, the Polish, I mean, everybody wanted to go to France because that's where the great weavers went to learn all this very beautiful, flat, how, you know, spatial, and the Polish weavers were making wild things, like three-dimensional things that came out and just really fun, and I didn't really discover them until within the last 10 years, I'd say. So they've been kind of an influence on me to see at that time, you know, how 50 years ago, how they were coming up with these three-dimensional effects in weaving that most people don't think about. You know, it's usually all just flat. So